if you have like a picture of a moon and people send 50 rockets to that moon, 50 rocket emoji, then that picture can have a moon base appear on it. And these are like evolving reactive NFTs that can react to some certain user inputs or on-chain flags or params and so on.
Hi there, and welcome to the Parachain Auctions Podcast hosted by Kraken. I'm Brian Hoffman, Crypto Platform Product Lead, and I'm glad you could join me out here on the cutting edge of crypto technologies. Now, on this show, you'll hear from leaders and innovators around the world building parachains on Polkadot and Kusama. Tune in for insights from the best and brightest about their new projects. Whether this is the first you've heard of parachains or you're a DeFi aficionado, come with us behind the scenes as we explore the technology of the future today. Today we have with us Bruno Škvorc, the founder of Remark, RMRK, if you've seen it online. Welcome to the show, Bruno.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Or I should say, welcome back to the show. We attempted to record this a little while ago and had some technical difficulties to work through, but you're back and things look like they're working well so far.
Yep, indeed.
So, we started to kind of get into some of the conversation last time we chatted, but I'd like to go back and get a refresher on this. So like maybe you could give us a little bit of a history of how you got involved with this, because NFTs are extremely hot right now. And as far as I understand, your background goes all the way back to like developing Flash, which for people who are young on listening to this, it was like an animation scripting kind of tool platform built by Macromedia, which was bought by Adobe. But maybe you could walk us through your history and how you got to Remark.
Yeah, sure. I was a gamer in high school and always wanted to build games or game-like or highly interactive stuff. And so when I encountered Flash, it was this beautiful merger of really simple JavaScript-like code and animation. And so you could just draw something in vector format really easily, turn it into symbols, and then just apply code to those symbols individually to make them move around the screen and build beautiful interactive games and applications with that. And you could, what's best, you could like export them into standalone exe files so people could just run them on their machine. No browser needed, none of that mess. And yeah, it was a golden era of interactive development. Every website seemed to have like 3D chromatic spiders crawling over it and really in-depth animations that were just, one more impressive than the other. Then they got acquired by Adobe, and things became even better, frankly. But then like Apple put the hammer down on Flash because of some in-browser vulnerabilities, and overnight the world turned on them. And so then Flash became a dirty word. It was removed from almost all the browsers, and soon enough it was more or less dead. Flash still exists in its previous form. It was rebranded to Adobe Animator or Animation or something like that. Does pretty much the exact same things. So you can still code animations and so on. Only it's not as easy to get the stuff into the browser. So it was really easy. Flash was really good to build browser-based games. And so this is
maybe they need an NFT plugin or something.
That would actually be kind of cool, yeah. And so you would use Flash to kind of enrich your websites. That was the main purpose of it back then. Aside from the other stuff like building games and applications that ran standalone, but people would use it to like spiffy up parts of their website or something like that. And so you needed this plugin for that. And so my first gig was to build a PDF reader in Flash for PDF files for an open access publisher, where this was in a time when in-browser PDF readers were still not a thing. And so this was pretty cool. This was where I learned most of my early programming. And because Flash was kind of hacky in terms of a language that was used, I was trained on hacky code. So I grew up loving JavaScript, PHP, and ultimately Solidity, which is kind of, Solidity is kind of the PHP of blockchain development, or the JavaScript of the blockchain development, because it's really simple, really easy to learn, really easy to mess up, and but really easy, really fast to ship with. So you can get a product out extremely quickly. So when I encountered, I used to do web development then after the Flash period, and when I encountered Ethereum in 2015, I just dropped all the web development stuff, dove in for a year, just canceled my contracts, spent a year on just learning, getting as many of my Web2 colleagues over into Web3 to develop for Web3, on Web3, whatever. Participated in hackathons, just tried to learn as much as I could. And this led me to start some educational projects later on, which in turn led to me getting hired by the Status project to work on technical education for the Nimbus project, which is the node for Ethereum 2.0. And so after that, I was hired by the Web3 Foundation to work on Polkadot and Kusama in the same capacity, so technical education, which, like, it sounds fancy or complicated, but it's actually just copy pasting knowledge from one person's head to another person's head. So your duty is to just understand what the person smarter than you is saying, and then distill that down into Muggle language, where you basically just translate it to the civilians and the developers who have no exposure to blockchain. That's what it is. I was a big part of the first NFT craze when CryptoKitties were around, and this kind of this phase. It was pretty obvious that it was a phase back then. It was a bubble, but it was a fun bubble, and I participated in it quite a lot. But when it died down, nobody really missed it. It wasn't really like, shame, now these NFTs are done, and what are we going to do now? It was more like, yep, okay, that ran its course. Let's go on to the next thing. But there were some similarities between the previous bubble and this one when it was starting up. So I recognized that, and that was in August last year. And so I figured, let's not miss out on this. I was deep into Kusama at the time, and Kusama is Polkadot's Canary network, which is kind of geared towards this cypherpunky nature, experimental nature. It's open to kind of weird hacks built on top of it, weird products. And I liked that a lot. And so since Kusama is not a smart contract based chain and doesn't have any customizability in terms of logic, I figured, how could we get NFTs onto Kusama so that the chain doesn't miss out on this coming craze, but without smart contracts? And so this is how I started Remark. I basically built a specification, which is a set of rules and tools that help you essentially interpret custom notes on the blockchain. And I call those graffiti because you literally vandalize the chain with custom messages that are then custom interpreted with these special rules and tools. And so some teams picked that notion up and tried to build UIs for it. There was actually some interest developing, but by the time it was January, I kind of realized that this wasn't at the level of quality that I wanted it to be at. And so we formed a team. I found 3 co-founders to join me in this venture, and we just formed an official entity and started building stuff. And since January, we've been shipping like crazy, building products, marketplaces, launches, contests, and so on. And now we have an extremely vibrant NFT system on Kusama, which we're extremely proud of.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Just even going all the way back to, I never thought about it when I read your bio initially. I didn't really make the connection between Flash development and kind of what's happening right now with the NFT space, but it really makes a lot of sense and seems like quite a natural progression. I mean, in reality, Flash was there because people saw static JPEGs and GIFs and was like, well, how do we make these things more interactive? How do we build upon this and like extend their functionality and kind of like really creative ways? And that's kind of what we're seeing with the NFT space. I think, I think somebody within your group, or maybe you yourself, pegged it as like NFTs 2.0, and which it's kind of funny because they're so new. It's like we're already on a 2.0, but we're seeing NFTs kind of each project that comes out is kind of layering another little bit of like intricate detail on top of it, like introducing a new feature. CryptoKitties was like the first, but even then there was still the like inheritance and like kind of like generations, and they could breed, and there was additional functionality. So a lot of people criticize NFTs for being just like static images that people collect, but there's a lot more to it. And you guys are working on technology that will take it even like further, which I think is fascinating. Let's go back to you started working with Status and Web3 on education, and you kind of downplayed your contributions there, saying it's just copy paste from one person to another. But it's actually very difficult to produce good educational content, and it's very important for people. What do you think was the biggest advantage of that? Like, what did you take away from that work that really has helped you as you've been building Remark and the organization there?
There's a big disconnect in the mindset between people who are not exposed to blockchain and those who are or want to be. This was especially apparent when my team joined me in Remark. They were all Web2 developers coming from React world, and they had been looking for a few months for an into blockchain. And so it was just a crazy coincidence that we actually managed to meet up at the exact same time when they were looking for an in, and I needed a team. It actually, like, they're still not 100% on the level of understanding the ideals and the priorities of blockchain-based development. So, it's very difficult to communicate that it's of utmost importance that this thing be not reliant on a centralized database server, something that can go down and take the whole thing down. Because as developers, they're not exposed to the pitfalls of downtime. There's the occasional AWS slip up where you're, without your website for a few hours. And there's maybe, if you're running your own server, maybe it'll go down. Fine. Maybe you'll lose power in your neighborhood and then you won't be able to access something. But generally, that's the extent of a Web2 developer's exposure to downtime and to unavailability of a service. Now, NFTs are far from, life-sustaining things. They're not exactly like, you're not going to die if you can't access your NFTs for a few hours.
I don't know. You're pretty devout NFT fans out there.
That's a good point. But it's like, follow the ideals as much as possible and compromise as little as possible. And so it's very difficult to get people who are not native to this universe, to this blockchain world. It's very difficult to make them understand why this is such a priority. Like I live in a country where just one generation ago, all the information that my parents got was government sanctioned.
And which country is that, just for our listeners?
Croatia, which was in their time, it was Yugoslavia, right? Mm-hmm. And so you had some information, but the information you had was limited to government newspapers, government TV, and government whatever they would government radio, whatever they would give you. Occasionally, somebody would travel to the outside world, and then they would come back with news of the West. And this is how a lot of the music in Croatia started, by just stealing riffs from Western musicians, because there was no internet, so you couldn't check that it was stolen. And maybe 50% of the top of the musicians in Croatia of the time were built on stolen music from America. But it's just like this informational asymmetry where you just can't access what the world knows. And so by deprioritizing this censorship resistance and access to media, like whenever, wherever you want it, you're making these compromises, and you're kind of, setting a precedent for that to be okay later on. And so even for something as trivial and ultimately meaningless as NFTs, at least in their current format when they're just, pictures of apes. Even this is sending a message. Like when you compromise, you're sending a message. And so as few compromises as possible is like the motto here, which, we've had to make some serious compromises, and we're working very hard to remove all of them now in the next stage of Remark's deployment. But generally, that was the absolute biggest hurdle. People who don't experience something being taken from them do not fear it being taken from them. And so that's a major catch-22 in most developed countries, where people just don't understand, like, why would I care about a slow and expensive technology that lets me access everything when I can already access everything? So this catch-22 is what's most difficult to make, to make understandable to people.
Yeah, you made some really really important points there. I mean, the first about people not really fully appreciating the power of decentralization and blockchain and crypto in general. It's tough because, especially here in the West, people, they just take all that stuff for granted. Like you said, nothing goes down, Facebook's always available. You have phone service, you don't even think about it. Like, even if somebody's taking something away from you, you just go somewhere else and get it or whatever. And that's part of the fascination I had with Bitcoin early on, for sure, is that. But I've never had to experience that, and I think a lot of others here don't understand that. The other piece of that point that you made is, well, you were saying your team doesn't fully understand that too, and you've been in this space since 2015, so you're like a grandfather. You have to give them some time to to learn the ways.
They've come around. They understand like most of it now, but they're not maximalists like I am, and I want them to join the cult. So
yeah.
Working on that.
Yeah, the other point you made about compromises, I think the space is filled with compromises because it's not really black or white. I mean, it's very difficult to build a completely contained system that just operates on its own. And, just getting people to run nodes and participate in all these things, it's very difficult. And so you see a lot of people compromising. Like, we have a spectrum, right? Like, there's very centralized blockchains, private blockchains, and then there's like Bitcoin, and then there's all this stuff in between. So this is a really great conversation, but I want to start talking a little bit more about Remark specifically. So you came from Web3, you started Remark. Like, how did you kick that off? Like what was the first thing you guys started working on when you formed the team?
So I had tried to get kind of internal funding for Remark to hire just a dev team and work on it while I was technically educating there. So I would just, like side gig lead it. This did not work out. And so I decided we need a fundraise of sorts, but I didn't want to step on any regulators' toes. Instead, I wanted to, at the same time, have an NFT launch so that the concept of NFTs on a smart contract-less blockchain can be proven, but also use those NFTs to simultaneously fundraise to keep the team, alive and working on that concept and take it further.
Did you guys consider building on another chain? I mean, as you said, there were no smart contracts and stuff. Seems odd that you would choose that as the primary platform over others that already have it.
Yeah, a big part of it was just a challenge. I liked trying to build something on an ecosystem that didn't want it, but also I was like deeply into Kusama, and so it only made sense to focus on Kusama. I was at Web3 at the time, and so I was deeply focused on Polkadot and Kusama. So it would have been weird and kind of disjointed for me to go and deploy something on Polygon or whatever else was available. Additionally, the concepts that I had in mind just were not possible on EVM chains due to some optimization problems, and like our NFTs are built to be interacted with extremely frequently. And even an empty, unused EVM chain is going to be too inefficient in processing those interactions to be financially accessible to most. So it's going to be too expensive for people to interact with the NFTs, even if the chain is completely unused, and Ethereum is far from it. Like today has barely seen a Gwei price below 100. That means that to send any amount of stablecoins, you need $30 of transaction fees. So interacting with NFTs at $30 per interaction, not an option for most people. Even at $1 per interaction, like it would be on Polygon, still too much. And because these are designed to be interacted with frequently. And so on Kusama, it was extremely cheap to develop and publish these. And we also had no baggage of Ethereum-based standards. So Ethereum has huge bodies of work behind their standards, behind ERC 721 and ERC 1155, where these were discussed and chewed over and integrated for years. And now you have a lot of marketplaces that are extremely used to them. So when you build an NFT, you're expected to follow that standard, which is good because automatically your NFT is supported by all of these marketplaces. But it's also bad because developing anything that is even remotely custom relies on your custom UI. And if that UI goes down, those NFTs don't have that functionality. This is because Ethereum has settled on the lowest common denominator in these standards, where it supports the largest body of work, but in turn limits these NFTs to be forever simple. This is why we have this wave of just expensive JPEGs. Any kind of custom integration, custom interaction between NFTs has to be centralized and processed that way. In the recent launch of Mutant Apes Yacht Club, they relied on you having a Serum and a Bored Ape Yacht Club ape in your wallet, and you could mutate your ape through their site only. You didn't really have any way to do it on OpenSea, for example, and you didn't have a way to do it because OpenSea is just not aware of that functionality. OpenSea supports the bare minimum needed to support the ERC 721 and ERC 1155 standard, and will not go beyond it, because if it does, then it's a slippery slope of how far will we go to support all of these custom use cases of all of these thousands of custom NFTs.
Yeah.
And so this is why they settled on this. For us, it was advantageous to launch on a system that has no standards at all, particularly because we could move fast, break things, and innovate extremely quickly and reach a final product that is deployed to production within 6 months and iterate on it multiple times without having to go through extremely long discussions with standards bodies and feedback loops and so on. So while we did cripple ourselves by launching on a chain that doesn't really that isn't really compatible logic wise with everything we want to do, it helped us prove the concept, prove the ideas, and demonstrate that there is tremendous interest for what we're building. And so this has kind of given us the wind beneath our wings to deploy the other stuff that we want to deploy in the very near future.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, the decision on whether or not you standardize things so much that everybody can do it consistently, but yet most of the projects revolving around this are like creative projects. They're involving brands who want to be stand out and be unique and go beyond that functionality, yet these standards don't really support that. I mean, it seems like such a no-brainer, the realization that you guys have come to, that like there really needs to be some more modular approach to this that gives people more flexibility. I mean, I think one challenge on being too flexible though is like, how do you get people to use it? Sometimes it's like there's too many tools in the toolbox and it's like, well, what do I do with it? Like I don't have kind of an obvious progression. So how do you guys think about that? Like, how do you explain to people like what they can do when it's like there's so much there?
Yeah, that's a major challenge. and maybe even a mistake on our part, now that I've seen what Loot has become. And Loot is a project on Ethereum that launched maybe a week ago or something. Somebody just put NFTs that are just white text on black cards, a list of items that an adventurer would have: a robe of something, a helm of something else, leather gloves, and so on. It does nothing else. It's just text on a black background. If you inspect a smart contract, you can check, like, get headwear, and then it returns the name of the headwear that's on the card. That's it. It does nothing else. And this hyper primitive NFT actually inspired a whole movement around it, where a Loot metaverse has formed, where a ton of other completely unrelated people have minted dozens of side projects, dozens of derivatives on top of this, to the point where the floor price of these Loot cards, these white text and black background cards, is now at around 10 Ether. And just today, somebody actually made adventurer gold tokens, which are ERC20 tokens that you can claim if you have Loot. And you get 10,000 gold tokens, which are hilariously trading at 80 cents. So that's an $8,000 airdrop on top of the now 10 Ether worth Loot card that you already have, and all the other derivatives that have sprung up from this. And what's especially interesting is the kind of the avalanche that came from this, where the community just picked up their tools and built something because Loot was so primitive. So it was so primitive and so unopinionated. It even says in the description, do what you want with this. You're free to interpret it as however you want. It's so primitive, so simple, that it kind of leaves lets people go wild with their imagination. So it just plants a little seed and then people go crazy. On the opposite end of the spectrum, what we did was we created, like, in a nutshell, we built everything that every single NFT influencer in the past year has dreamed about. They all said it, they all tweeted it at one point or another. I wish NFTs could do this, I wish NFTs could do that. Remark NFTs can do all of that and more. And we built some NFT Legos that when you put them together, you can build a system of arbitrary complexity with that. And you can build a really, really intricate system, a game or a universe or whatever else. And it's standards compliant, which means that anybody who integrates the Remark standards will automatically support all of these features. Now, what we have as a downside is that our system is too powerful, too versatile, and so it's extremely hard to explain what it can do to somebody who's encountering it for the first time. They need like a eyedropper level exposure, where it just show them one little piece, let it simmer for a few days, then show them another piece, and so on. And this is one challenge that we're dealing with right now, is good documentation that really communicates that. A huge advantage is that if you integrate Remark's NFT Legos, so these primitives that we've created, you support every single use case that's possible to build with Remark without having to sacrifice any kind of customizability, without having to rely on custom UIs and so on. The downside of Loot in its simplicity is that everybody who's building for Loot, so these derivatives, they are now building the projects that do rely on their custom UIs. So they're running into the problem that I described earlier, where you can take a project further, but it is beholden to you. So if a bus hits the guy who built the interface to claim the gold tokens, that project is effectively dead unless he open sourced it and let other people take care of it, and so on. So it's not standardized. It's not supported by all of these marketplaces. Instead, you have to hunt down the custom UIs that people have built and use the custom interpretation user interfaces that they've built to kind of put those together. So, Loot is one type of building block where it's just a seed for an imagination and people can take it further, but will have a hard time making them interact properly. Whereas on the other hand, Remark is incredibly complicated and in many ways causes choice paralysis in people when they start building on it, but it can support any use case you can think of. Only right now it takes like a 1-hour chat with me to explain what it can do and how you can do it before you can start using it. And I'm hoping to get rid of that problem with better docs. Like as an example, the loot cards that have a list of loot. One guy made a smart contract where you can deposit the loot card, and this deposit will mint individual NFTs from that loot on that card. So if you have like an axe, a helmet, and a glove, you put that into the contract and you get 3 things. You get an axe, a helmet, and a glove. But, and this sounds cool, but if somebody builds a game where you can actually play with the loot cards, that game will not recognize these individual items because they are not part of the same contract. They're not part of the same standard.
Yeah.
Same thing. If I, for example, now trade my helmet for another helmet, I cannot use this newly formed trinity of helmet, glove, and whatever else I said to get that loot card back that I deposited because the elements don't match. So you can't really compose new cards from the elements that you trade between people. You can only get a card back if you get the original elements back. And this is a
really
limitation,
interesting
because they built on top of this way.
That's really interesting that they're like going backwards. They're like decomposing the NFT rather than like building it up into something bigger. It also kind of alludes to this coming future around fractionalization of NFTs. Like I know a lot of the groups that are working on fractionalization right now are thinking of it as more of like arbitrarily splitting an NFT or a collection of NFTs into like a finite amount of pieces and like kind of using it like that. But this is like fractionalization, but like non-arbitrary fractionalization. It's like decomposing it into these individual items. And it's like, how far can it go down? In your case, now, I think I remember from our previous conversation that you said that there's like NFTs can actually own NFTs. So it's like if you had a loot card that was like kind of replicated on your platform, it's theoretically that card could own all those items independently, right? And then like because it's all modular, people can actually use it and build it, and it won't be this like one-off experience that you're kind of describing.
Right. This is exactly what we have with our Canaria birds. So
okay, you got it. You said it, Canaria. You got to explain what is Canaria? What are these birds? What are the eggs? Tell us.
Canaria was the first prototype and proof of concept project that we launched. It was originally started as a limited set of eggs that people could buy to fund the team. And part of the Remark standard is an on-chain emoting capability so that you can send emotes like you would on any social media messenger or whatever to NFTs. And this is a great social mechanic where people just react to each other's NFTs, but it's also a fantastic price discovery method where you kind of find out that one thing is relatively more valuable than the other if a lot of people have reacted to it.
And this is native? This is like native functionality. This is not like OpenSea where you just favoriting things or...
This is native functionality that is available immediately in any UI that integrates the Remark standard. And we used the emote and the egg functionality, the egg project, to basically hatch birds from these eggs, where the emotes affected what kind of bird hatched. It not only affected the bird's look and disposition and emotion, it also affected the items or the sub-NFTs that the bird got. So if you sent a lot of tennis rackets emotes to your egg, then the bird may have been hatched with a tennis racket in its hand. And so our NFTs, like the birds are the proof of concept of Remark 2.0, which we just launched. And the birds are actually the demonstration of everything, of all of our art Legos, of all of our NFT Legos that we've constructed. So you have NFTs that are able to own other NFTs. You have NFTs that are able to equip other NFTs to change their appearance, actually. You have NFTs that have conditional rendering where they can actually react to the emotes. So for example, if you have like a picture of a moon and people send 50 rockets to that moon, 50 rocket emoji, then that picture can have a moon base appear on it. And these are like evolving reactive NFTs that can react to some certain user inputs or on-chain flags or params and so on. You have multi-resource NFTs where if you have like an ebook and then that ebook NFT can have a PDF and an audio version. And if you load that NFT into Audible, it will play. And if you load it into Kindle, you'll be able to read it. And we also have planned for a little bit later, so fractionalized NFTs, where you, now that the NFTs have all of this functionality, where you can change the priority of their resources, where you can equip and unequip items, send items out and in, it makes sense to allow a democratic rule over these functions, so that you can actually fractionalize an NFT and have the community collectively issue a command. And this is where you get to this canonical use case that I've been quoting everywhere, where you have this metaverse billboard, where if I own some plots of land in a virtual world that are NFTs themselves, and then I go to Singular, which is our marketplace for NFTs, and I buy a billboard NFT, that NFT can then be equipped into the land, and it will show up in the virtual world. And then I, as the owner of that billboard, I can fractionalize it into tokens, sell those to the community, and the community decides what's shown on that billboard. And so if some corporations come in, they want to put their ad there, it's up to them to bribe the community to pick them and not their competition. So you get kind of this community-based, DAO-based real estate management in the virtual universe, in the metaverse, which is not possible without heavy customizations and custom game engines anywhere else. But here it's practically native. And
it's like you could do the $1 million homepage on a billboard in the middle of the metaverse.
Easy. And so Canaria are the birds that hatched from these eggs, and already they have all of this functionality. So people who got these birds, they also got their items. But the items, the NFT items, they can be withdrawn to your main account, sent to another bird, equipped by that other bird, or just traded on the open market as is. And so we'll have an item marketplace where you can just trade between those items, equip your bird, customize its looks and appearance, and so on. And any interface that integrates our renderer for the birds will automatically be aware of those changes. So when I switch out my tennis racket for a banana in the Singular UI, this will be reflected on every single UI that integrates the birds. And so these are these mutable, it's like we built a global MMO in a way, which we're going to be expanding and expanding and expanding. So for example, later on, we'll be introducing the ability to take apart some of the common items to get some raw materials. And then you'll be able to craft new items that you can equip onto the birds and alter their appearance further and so on. So there's a lot of game mechanics planned here as well.
So you mentioned extensibility, like, giving new features and stuff to it. Like, when you are programming kind of your specific NFT drop, let's say, like you want to build your own Canaria on the platform, all that logic, is that like, does that have to be defined up front, or can people like modify it over time and upgrade it? And like, how does that work exactly?
So the equipping logic for items and everything, that's all automatic and part of the standard. So you have that built in. What you have as the issuer of the collection is the ability to whitelist certain collections of other NFTs that are equipable into that NFT. And so if you leave that field blank, it's just not equipable. If you leave it as an asterisk, then anything's equipable. And if you just, list the collections, then only those collections can be equipable. Projects will be able to cherry pick the functionality they want from our NFT Legos. So if somebody doesn't want their NFT system to have all of this equipping functionality, they don't have to have it. If somebody doesn't want the emotes, they don't have to have it. They can just pick the functions that they want. And you can actually, there's also a logic field in these NFTs that allows for that conditional rendering. And you can modify the logic field if you mint the NFT with a configuration that says logic is mutable. So if you mint an NFT that is like predetermined to have changeable logic, then you can change the logic after the fact. There is some thinking in advance that you need to do, but you don't have to define a whole system in advance.
Yeah, I was just kind of tying that question back to, like, how the Bored Ape Yacht Club is kind of like how they're expanding their ecosystem and like evolving their project. One of the big things of that NFT collection is that they've kind of given the users like more incentives, like outside of just the NFTs, right? Like they get access to certain apps and things like that. Are there ways that you said like when you put it into you could put it into a different app and it would allow you to maybe consume that content? Like, are you guys thinking about things like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, where like this experience is not just about the NFTs, it's like tying into other kinds of like media? It could be movies, it could be concerts. I know that there's like work being done where NFTs are like passes to concerts, get you access, and then they get you other media content, and maybe there's NFTs tied to it. Like, are you engaging with NFT creators and brands and stuff, and like trying to listen to them and see what they're looking for?
Absolutely. We have a number of partnerships lined up in the real world space, from physical items redeemable with the birds to a lot of other stuff that we'll announce in time. But even right now, we have 6 or 7 active partnerships with actual parachains in the Kusama ecosystem, where just owning a bird and an item from that chain's project will give you special rights when you enter their app. So, for example, your bird could have a Karura headband, and if you log into Karura's app with the same account that owns that bird, you will get some benefits, like maybe a higher return rate or a lower stability rate on loans and so on. And so we have a ton of these in the pipeline with a lot of partners that we've partnered up with during the sale and during the crowd loan phase. So they had crowd loans. People who crowd loaned for them could claim those items for the birds. And now when you equip that item onto the bird, it is active and you can get a perk from that team. So we absolutely have a huge expansive universe here planned. And the fact that all of these chains have actually committed to adding our logic natively to their runtime helps us solidify Remark as basically the first unofficial shared runtime of the Polkadot ecosystem, which means that once this is integrated, you will be able to teleport your non-fungibles seamlessly and extremely cheaply across all of these supporting chains. So, you want to, sell a really cool painting from your BitCountry apartment on a marketplace on Unique Network. It's a click away. You just click one button, and behind the scenes, the teleportation happens, and your item is listed on the Unique Network marketplace, like their version of OpenSea, and you get to sell it there where the users are. So this sort of universe expansion is definitely in the works.
Yeah, the potential for this is massive. It'll be really exciting to see how things evolve over the next few months and years. So you guys are not actually planning to do a parachain. That's correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and so was there anything special about Kusama that needed to happen before you guys could actually operate on top, or like how does it work exactly? Because I understand the concept around like the parachains, when they win the slot, then they can kind of go into live mode, but you guys aren't doing that. So how does it work?
So we have this specification, the Remark specification, which is a set of rules for how to interpret custom messages. And so you just leave a custom message alongside a block, which is called a remark, which is where the project got its name. And these rules that are written off-chain, they interpret this message in a specific way. So this is very similar to how Bitcoin did it in the early days when they tried to do NFTs on Bitcoin. Naturally, nobody really wants to wait for an hour for their NFT to arrive, so that never happened. But the logic is there. It makes sense to be reused in this limited environment. So you essentially submit a transaction that contains no value, but has a remark that says, send this NFT ID to this address. And so now we have a set of rules that listens for these remarks. And when it notices such a message, it just interprets it. Okay, this was sent to this person. Let's check if this person is actually allowed to send this NFT. And it does this by checking all the past records, all the previous remarks that it had. And so this, like every time a new remark appears, it's checked against the history of all of the old ones. If it's invalid, it's invalidated. If it's valid, it's added to the set. And this is how the NFT set grows. This is also at the same time one of the biggest limitations of Remark, in that it's really, really slow to sync. Because in order to have a truthful recent state of NFTs on Kusama, you have to have a record of all the previous remarks that happened, because you need to consolidate them from top to bottom, so that they're like, in one final valid state. This is something that's going to be alleviated by us deploying pallets and smart contracts, which is also coming very soon. And then will be like deployed on all of these partner chains that have committed to adding our logic. For now, we are basically a hack on top of Remark, on top of Kusama, purely because we just didn't want to wait for 8 or 9 months for chains to start appearing so that we could start building. So we wanted to get this, out early, prove that there's interest, build a huge and very enthusiastic community, and then just give them, improvements over time by deploying on these logic enhanced blockchains.
Yeah, what a great strategy, especially in light of not knowing exactly how these things are going to shape up over the next few months. So typically on this podcast, we have Parachain teams that are bidding, and we like to ask them this last question, to kind of get a sense of like how hard it's been for them to prepare for that. But I'm still going to go ahead and ask you, because you are like knee deep in Kusama world. The slogan for Kusama is "Expect Chaos," which I think everybody's aware of at this point. So we ask for a chaos score, 1 to 10, how you would rate how chaotic working on Kusama has been for you and your team.
1 to 10.
10 being extremely chaotic.
Yeah, I would say somewhere around 6 or 7 throughout the past 8 months, and then a 10 over the last month.
Why has it jumped up so much?
So in the beginning, we had these problems where we broke Kusama twice by organizing some fairly popular contests on Remark. So when we had like top emote competition, where the top emoted eggs would actually get secondary artwork, so they would become multi-resource NFTs, which are by default much more valuable, because they demonstrate a much richer functionality and get a commissioned artist to do something for them. People realized that this could be scripted, and they nuked the chain with 300,000 remarks in one go, and so on. This happened twice, and so twice we brought Kusama down. The first time it was the relay chain that failed to process the transaction, and the second time it was the collators of the Parachains that stopped, Moonriver and Karura. Good stress testing, though. Good problems to find this early on.
Yeah, that's why you have a canary chain, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. And then, as we wanted to launch our token on the system level common good Parachain state mine, we created the token placeholder. We reserved the slot. We did the only sensible legal thing to do and moved control over it to a multisig so that it's not in the hands of one person. And we were ready to mint the tokens and distribute them to our egg buyers. So we were distributing our token according to a fair drop that we defined very early on, which is 100% of the tokens go to all of the egg holders. That means if all the eggs are sold out, then all of the tokens are distributed to the community, much like Moonriver, which distributed its tokens to the crowd loaners. As it turns out, StateMine does not support multi-signature accounts, but it does support you moving control over an asset to a multi-signature account. And so we have been in limbo for over a month now, waiting for that fix, which means that not a single token on StateMine currently can have multi-signature transactions. And this is why it's on a 10 for us. It's a little bit like uncomfortable having centralized exchanges and investors wait for a patch on a common good parachain. So this is why it's a 10 for us right now. We hope that gets resolved soon, because people have been waiting for a long time.
Well, that's interesting. I wasn't aware that it was your project that was mucking with the Kusama during those issues. But that's good that they found that. You guys are helping stress test it for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I think we're probably going to have to leave it there because of time. I mean, I think we could talk for hours on this. I would love to be able to bring you back along, later on and see how things are going and check back in with you. In the meantime, where can people go to find out more about the project, and learn more about Canaria?
So to find out more about the project in general, there's a Crowdcast I'd like to share. Can you share a link with people?
I believe we can put it into the YouTube description. Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it to you. Then also Remark.app website is, so RMRK.app website. It's overdue for a redesign and we're working on it, but it'll contain links to everything that's relevant. We have a few Telegram groups that we hang out in, and but I would say most importantly, check out the NFTs in action. So go to canaria.rmrk.app and scroll through some of the birds and the items, and realize that these are actually NFTs 2.0, where NFTs can contain other NFTs, trade items between themselves and between external accounts, and try to think of the potential that this is opening up, because I think that's really exciting and really interesting.
Yeah, I took a look at some of those today, and the artwork's really cool, and everything's like, it's pretty interesting, especially because I looked a while ago and it was just eggs. Now they're all hatched, which is cool. Yeah. Well, thanks again to our guest, Bruno. It was great learning more about Remark. Make sure you like, subscribe, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. And we will be sure to bring you along as we get a backstage pass to the world of Parachain Auctions. Until next time, I'm Brian Hoffman, and this has been the Parachain Auctions Podcast. This content is not financial or investment advice. All interviews and discussions are opinions only. Kraken does not endorse the accuracy of this content. None of the following information should be construed as a recommendation to support any specific Parachain project or to participate in Parachain auctions in general. See our terms of service for more information.